What terrifying confession has someone told you while intoxicated?
My uncle told me he was RPD as a child by an older friend. Explains a lot of his problems.
It is horrifying how many of these stories include childhood sexual abuse. We know more about it these days, but it still happens so much more than we realize.
Gay man dying of AIDS said I could charge my entire bar tab to his credit card cause he was going to die soon. Edit, it was me and a few friends watching football, so our tab was probably plus $200, but I was talking to him for a while before he said this. Think he was lonely and scared. So we just watched football with him for the rest of the afternoon. Made him feel welcome and normal at least for a while. Just wanted what the rest of us do, to not feel alone and that someone cares. I believe his name was Ron. Edit number 2. This was 2001.
When I was about 18, I worked for a moving company. They'd hire just about anybody that could lift heavy things, so I worked with all kinds of colorful characters. This one day I was out with this really old guy who is super old school and a real alcoholic. Our first move of the day was in a homosexual area of town in Toronto, and on the drive down my colleague was making a whole bunch of gay jokes. There was nothing I could really say or do, so I just kept quiet and kept on driving. The whole move was really difficult. The apartment hallways were really narrow. The apartment was right at the end of a very long hallway. The elevator was tiny and the apartment itself had 2 stories with a windy narrow staircase connecting them. When we finally got there, I knocked on the door, and when it opened, the man who answered was literally bawling his eyes out. I looked at my colleague who was looking at this gay man crying very deeply, and my colleague turned to me and said I'll be in the truck, and walked away and wouldn't help me with the move at all. Turns out the guy who owned the apartment was moving into palliative care because he had AIDS and was dying. I did that whole move myself, and I'll never forget how devastated that man was as I took all his stuff out of that house. I just wish there was something I could say to help him, but there wasn't, so I just did my job.
My dad told me while he was drunk that the reason him and my mom divorced is because she slept with his best friend, who is now my stepdad, and they have my brother. I nearly effing fainted as I spent the last 20 years being lied to, as I had no idea. About 5 years ago, my brother had his girlfriend sleeping over at our house because we'd had a family game night and been partying. I should interject here and say that not a single one of my family really ever liked this girl, and to all appearances she had no love for us either. She was extremely antisocial, hardly ever even said hello to any of us when she came over, and her and my brother would spend all of their time up in his room. Anyways, that night they had both come down and socialized, and we had all been drinking quite a lot. Everyone left and my parents went to bed, but I was still up around 3 a.m. and sitting downstairs watching TV and getting stoned when she walked down in a t-shirt and her underwear. She walked out to the kitchen like it was nothing, and I got a good glimpse of a thigh as she walked by and saw a long row of 1-inch marks down the length of the thigh. I thought for sure she'd hurry back up as soon as she was done in the kitchen, but to my surprise she plopped down on the floor and started talking like we were good friends. I got an earful to be sure, but the most shocking things I heard were that one of her uncles had RPD her when she was 11 or 12, and others had molested her, and she'd been self-harming since. She was around 22 at the time of the conversation, so about 10 years worth of self-harm. She showed me all of the scars she had, down her thigh and her arms. She also said that since she had started dating my brother she hadn't harmed herself and was happy. I realized that her being antisocial had nothing to do with this and was as nice as possible to her from then on. They did break up later, but I'll always remember that little convo.
You did a good thing for her by listening. Thank you.
Coworker told me he killed a dude. The other guy had a bad reputation for being a violent asshole and made it pretty clear that only one of them would be leaving the room alive. My coworker decided that he would prefer to be the one who didn't die. He did turn himself in and spent some time in prison.
Why was the other guy so mad at him?
From what I understand, he was a really mean drunk. My coworker had stood up to him on other occasions and he was pissed that his intimidation wasn't working. Of course, I only heard my coworker's side of the story, so take that as you will. My impression of my coworker was that he was a decent guy, although I have been wrong about people before.
Ages back I was helping a blackout drunk coworker to his apartment, etc. He was needing to be carried 1 second and sprinting across the parking lot the next. As we're getting close to his room he starts breaking down. Why did I hit him? I shouldn't have run etc. Turns out drunk Diego is pretty convinced he hit a kid with his car one day. Sober Diego has no idea what he was talking about.
Sober Diego knows exactly what drunk Diego was talking about, he just knows better than to tell you.
Freshman year of college, among all the new friends I made that year, there was one guy who was always a goofball. Very laid back, casual, down for whatever. The biggest red flag we got from him was that whenever people were drinking and hanging out, he would always essentially black out. He drank way too much and would kind of spaghetti noodle his way around the party. While also intoxicated, after the party had winded down one night, a few people and I asked him why he always goes so damn hard. While drooping his head a ton, sloshing around, and slurring everything, he told us about how a few months ago, the summer before college started, his best friend called him. They lived in a small town by the beach, and his friend asked him to come meet him to watch the sunset by the water. He biked over there, sat down, and they talked for a while. Everything seemed fine. Then his friend took out a pistol and shot himself in the head, killing himself instantly. Apparently my friend had to call the police while covered in blood, brains, and skull fragments, just totally in shock. And then a few weeks later he went off to college a few states away, still in shock and unable to sleep or focus on anything. He didn't remember telling us that story, and I don't think any of us wanted to bring it up. His drinking habits didn't change until he was about to graduate, by which point he started going to therapy, got a job right after graduation, and seems to be doing better in the years since, thank God.
That is so F-ed. Those poor kids.
My brother was drunk and he told me how he got sexually assaulted by our half-brother when he was 8. And that he knew that our half-brother assaulted me too when I was 5. I hadn't ever told my brother about my situation, so I was in shock.
I had 2 friends, one female, one male, that were both clearly upset sitting out in the patio area of the bar by themselves. I see them, ask them both if they're okay, and the guy right away says, "Nah, but I can't talk to you about it," so I say, "Alright. Let me know if you ever want to. Love you guys." And he goes, "Actually, come back here. You're good brew." They both proceeded to tell me about how they each got sexually assaulted, one by their uncle and the other by their cousin. Apparently I was the first guy that he's ever confided in. She said she's only told a couple people other than her therapist. I'm friends with them, but definitely not anywhere near that close with them. I have no idea if either of them remember the conversation.
A friend of mine likes to drink, a lot, but he knows he has a limit because when he goes over it he becomes very talkative. He also doesn't date, at all, and for a long time we all wondered why. He's a good-looking guy, he's really nice, he's fun to be around, when he isn't drinking, anyway, never wants to date. Well, one time he got absolutely poo-faced and I found out why. It turns out that when we was a kid, he saw his aunt murder his uncle in cold blood. Ever since, he's been terrified of being alone with a woman and feels like he could never truly be safe around them.
That is some serious childhood trauma.
My mom told me she wished she aborted me when I was 8 or 9 or so. She's doing better now after a long struggle with alcoholism. Our relationship is much better, and when I told her this a few months ago she hugged me tightly and keeps apologizing to this day. Edit. Thank you so much for the awards. And everyone who relates, I hope you will find peace and love wherever you may go.
Glad she apologized.
They didn't tell me this while they were drunk, but I think it fits here. I am a volunteer at a nursing home. When one of the female residents was close to death, she confided it in me this. One time her husband cheated on her with the neighbor's wife. When the neighbor's husband found out, he was very upset and was going to physically hurt her husband. They worked out a deal where the neighbor's husband would not hurt her husband if he was able to return the favor. In essence, her husband agreed to let the neighbor have her in order to save himself a righteous beating. It gets worse, she later became pregnant and told her husband for the rest of his life that it was his, but she honestly believed it to be the neighbor's. Her whole life she was carrying this burden about her son and what her husband had done to her, both with the cheating on her and with the trading her off like a cow. It was truly a heartbreaking conversation.
That's so depressing.
My grandpa never talked about his Korean War service. He had severe PTSD though. Would wake up in the middle of the night screaming. Then one night he came home absolutely poo-faced, laid down on the couch, then told me that his entire unit had been wiped out before his eyes. He was the sole survivor and got caught behind enemy lines but made it out. He was their sergeant and blamed himself. He eventually got into veterans therapy in his 60s though.
Survivor's guilt is on a whole other level. Glad he got some help. I drunkenly confessed to my aunt at Christmas about how unhappy I've been feeling for the last 2 years and that I've got a bit of a coke addiction. The phone call from my sister the next morning was awkward as hell to have. Edit, didn't think this would blow up. Thanks for the advice and kind messages, smiley face. I'm currently 2 weeks cold turkey and today has been rough one. Reading these comments and having people DM me advice or just generally asking if I'm okay has given me the motivation I've needed to keep at it.
Coke really FS with your brain chemistry and mood. I hope you get clean. It might not fix all of your problems, but it will help. Good luck to you.
My uncle said that my grandfather wasn't exactly a caring, loving father because of working in the coal mines. He said my pap was terrified every day because he didn't know if he was coming home or not cause he'd hear the mountains above him crack.
The mines are F-ed. My grandpa and his brothers were the first generation in the family not to go down the pits. His father and grandfather both lost their lives in mining accidents.
I had a colleague tell me 20 drinks in she was not only suicidal, but that she had unsuppressed HIV and was knowingly transmitting it to partners she was sleeping with and not telling them because she didn't care about people. I'm an HIV case manager, so this was absolutely horrific for me.
Please tell me you reported her. That's a effing heinous crime.
I certainly did.
Playing Truth or Dare at a party with close friends. Our lesbian friend of 8 years chooses Truth. Other friend asks her, jokingly, if she's ever sucked DK. Everyone's laughing, she isn't. She admits to being RPD by her uncle for 4 years as a child. Friend who asked starts crying, he had no idea. None of us did.
My brother got terribly drunk 2 years ago at Thanksgiving. Like 7 or 8 Sam Adams, and he was fine at first. Then he started sobbing, and I was the one to comfort him for more than 3 minutes. He confided in me about his suicidal thoughts and how he fought with his friends about their relationships and how happy they are and wished he could have that too. Maybe fought is the wrong word, like he felt happy that they were happy, but was sad that he wasn't happy like that too. He said he was too scared to do it, because then I would be alone. It was the turning point where I could finally get him to get on antidepressants. He also brought up something from when we were like 6. And he put gum in my hair and we had to cut my hair off, and he was sobbing over this, calling himself a terrible brother and that I didn't deserve him. I didn't even remember that happening. And I ended up with short hair anyways, so I don't really care. He's doing way better now and hasn't ever gotten that drunk again. Love my brother, man. I'm gonna go give him a hug.
Was chilling with an older dude with whom I recently started working as a butcher in a grocery store. A couple of beers down and he starts telling me he's been in prison for 17 years. Came out 2 years ago and it's his first ever job at 64 years old. I got curious and asked him what happened if at WASNT2 private. Without hesitation, he simply answered, I cut him down with an axe, this piece of poo. ... And now he's a butcher. Dude must really like his job, I guess. LMAO.
Find a job you love and you'll never work a day in your life.
That's the motto. LMAO. Man's living his best life chopping things up on the daily.
This was about 6 months ago now. My brother and I were getting drunk one night because it was the weekend and we just wanted to get F-ed up and play video games. We had done plenty of shots and plenty of drinks and we were the definition of F-ed up. We were having fun playing some old WAW zombies for nostalgia, and we paused it to grab some chips. As I was grabbing the salsa, he said to me that he had tried committing suicide about a month prior to this. He had taken some pills and they pumped his stomach and poo, and he told me the whole time he was thinking of me and how pooty and depressed I'd be if he had died and that he'd never want to lose me. I told him I had also tried committing suicide a while ago and I thought the exact same thing about him. We continued playing zombies while talking about everything under the moon, and we've been talking every day since, have never missed and will never miss a day. We're both doing a lot better now and we're both in therapy. It's nice having someone to talk to and trust about these things. Edit. Thanks for the awards, y'all. But instead of gifting me stuff, check on your friends and family, and especially people you haven't talked to in a bit. Sometimes we're just too depressed to try initiating conversation.
His love for you saved his life, and your love for him saved your life. If I were your mom, I'd be proud to have raised such loving brothers.
One time, an old acquaintance, F49, and I, M32, were drinking late into the night. She drank much faster than me, and before long randomly and drunkenly confessed to me the following. When her aging and sick mother, whom she despised and was a ton of unappreciated work to care for, was left in her care, she intentionally withheld certain medications and gave her too much of other ones, with the plan being to kill her off. It worked. She told her other siblings that the illness must have finally gotten to her and she passed in her sleep. Since she was already old and sick, there was no autopsy. A minute later she snapped out of it and apologized profusely for telling me that, adding that I am the only person she has ever told. Edit. This is the most likes, comments, awards or anything I've ever received on Reddit on a comment or post. Thanks for all the interesting responses and awards.
Hope she doesn't decide it's too risky for you to walk around knowing that.
I know, right? She was always a bit shifty and hot-headed.
We were talking about Al Franken and they said something along the lines of, all guys fondle girls when they are sleeping. I used to touch my sister all the time. You could have heard a pin drop. We're no longer friends.
I once had a friend tell me he used to kill cats as a child, like brutally skin them alive and dissection. His parents found out and sent him to therapy his whole childhood. As far as I know, he never did anything bad after, but I still wonder to this day. He told me out of the blue when we were tripping balls on mushrooms. Said he never felt regret for it but knew it was wrong. He said his curiosity was stronger than guilt. Never hung out with him again, and his comments sent me into, I need to go home now, kind LF trip.
I scolded a drunk girl because she was trying to shoot up in the bathroom of a strip club. At first, I was pissed because there was blood on the toilet seat. She started crying and said, "It's not my fault. My dad's been shooting me up since I was 10. It was freaking sad and I felt horrible for yelling at her. Edit. Shoot up equals injecting DG into her veins. I'm aware she could be lying, however, it could equally be true. In the strip club, you find a lot of effed up women, with effed up stories. Had it been anywhere else I wouldn't have believed her.
I can only imagine what he did that for. Victims of sexual slavery are typically made addicted to opioids in order to keep them working, enslaved.
My great-grandfather was in World War II. He never ever spoke of it. If you asked him about it, he would politely get up, grab his drink and go somewhere else. After my first deployment to Afghanistan, he called me and said, I can finally talk to someone. I started hanging out with him all the time. I would tell him stories and he would tell me some. When I went on leave, we had a night where me and him were going drink for drink. After a while he tells me about a time when him and his unit found a small concentration camp. They aren't all big like Auschwitz. He said the first thing he remembers was the smell. He said the smell was so bad he almost threw up a handful of times. So this camp didn't have ovens or a gas chamber. When they went through, at the north side of the camp was a pit they had dug out. Inside the pit must have been thousands of decaying bodies. He said he was sure that the ones on the bottom were probably skeletons. When they talked to the people, they said the Nazis would line people at random and shoot them. Their bodies would just fall in. He said the Jews told them that as some starved to death, they would throw themselves in with hopes of breaking their necks when they hit. The Germans knew the Allies were close. They locked the gate, took the food or poisoned it, and put dead bodies in the place they stored the water. He said the disease and infections were so bad that many of the soldiers in his unit were scared to help them. He told me that out of all the poo he had went through, that was the worst. It tore him apart, and he said those poor people would haunt his dreams. He felt like he didn't do enough. He felt like those times when they couldn't push the line forward, that was just another day or another week, those poor people had to be tortured. My great-grandfather was proud of his time in World War II. And he lived a great life. He died in 2011 at home in his bed watching his favorite show. Edit. I never expected this to blow up. I've posted about him before and never got a response like this. I am touched that so many people came to this comment and responded and read about my great-grandfather. However, I don't want people to know just this about him. My great-grandfather was a really good man. He was married for 60 years, and my great-grandmother passed 2 years after him. They had 12 children, and tried their best to make those around them happy. My great-grandfather wouldn't want any of you to be sad about what he went through. He was grateful for the opportunity to do something truly good for the world. However strong my own suffering is from experiencing what I can truly call hell on earth, I cannot fathom the eternal suffering the Jewish people have felt and will feel for generations to come. I am sorry for those that I could not save, and I am sorry for the times we had to retreat or fall back. I am sorry for the times we got pulled back to the rear. I knew of the atrocities your people faced, but until I saw them I had no idea. Do not feel sorry for me though, I am happy to suffer. I hope good things for your people's future, and I pray we all learn from this terrible war. He wrote this in a letter to one of the survivors from that camp. He couldn't bring himself to meet him in person and I didn't push him to. Thank you again to everyone. As for the museums, thank you everyone that gave a suggestion. I will be calling them tomorrow.
Showering off my blackout drunk father because he had poo himself when he starting bawling and confessed to being pinned down and RPD by his brother's friends. Edit. This comment took off, so I'll elaborate a bit on the FAQs. I was 16 when this happened. He worked an early shift, so he was always home when I'd get home from school and would be drunk on the average 4 days a week. He was never abusive or angry, just distant. But in that moment when he blurted it out I could see the pain and weight he was carrying through the tears. I was obviously in total shock, so I just let him sob and talk as I listened. I finished washing him off, then got him to bed where he slept it off. He was blackout drunk, so I knew he'd never remember the conversation, so I kept it to myself. Other than my therapist I've never told a soul until now. He blamed himself, and there's unfortunately still a stigma surrounding men and admitting sexual assault, but it does happen to them too and needs to be addressed. My father dealt with it in an unhealthy manner for a long time. Whether or not he talked to someone to address it properly I'll never know, but he has been sober for over 20 years now and much more present in our family's life.
Jesus Christ, that's heartbreaking.
My ex in college told me once when he was blackout drunk that a few years prior, him and a bunch of other kids broke into a house to have a party. The family that lived there was on vacation or something and were all gone. IDK how they picked the house or knew it'd be empty, sorry. It's been like 12 years, and I forgot some details. They all got drunk and someone decided it would be fun to break a picture on the wall. Then someone else did, too. Eventually it devolved into them all destroying the house. Absolutely everything they could. All the windows were broken. Broke the legs off all the chairs and used him to beat holes into the walls. Ripped and stole clothing. Ripped or burnt all the family photos on the walls and poo. I don't remember all the stuff he said that they broke, but I remember him crying and saying that they ruined those people's lives and there's no way to make it right. I honestly think he was so effed up that he doesn't remember telling me, because we never mentioned it again. Anyway, like 2 years later, he punched me in the face for asking for a ride to work, one too many times, so I guess he was a piece of poo regardless of current situation or alcohol intake.
A simple no would suffice, thanks.
That their uncle made them help bury a body.
An old co-worker of mine told me about how him and his friends killed a guy in the 80s who RPD one of their sisters. He wasn't even drunk. He said they pulled up to his trailer out in the desert, honked the horn, and when the guy came out about 6 guys all opened fire on him. He said that way no one knew exactly who killed him.
I have to admit it sounds clever.
My grandfather recalled his happy memories of visiting brothels in Algeria during the war. In front of my horrified grandmother, who he was already married to at the time and clearly had never heard of it. He also bragged about shooting a dozen people during that time, with a smile on his face. His side was the one invading. F'd up poo.
I had a friend who told me that his girlfriend dumped him because they got into a huge fight when they were drunk and she was convinced he threatened her with physical violence. He said he was saying things out of frustration like and all that, but he was sitting the whole time and she was the one that was yelling and screaming. Weird, but okay. A few weeks later, I meet him up for drinks and he is absolutely plastered. I walk him back to his place with one of his friends. As we're walking he starts crying and says that he F'd up and that he is a terrible person. We asked him to elaborate and he tells us that his ex left because he threw her into a mirror and then flipped a coffee table at her. She's okay, couple bruises, SCRPS. Kept my distance after that.
Abusive people look normal as F. And make you doubt the victim's words. I've been realizing how true it is by watching it happen in my life. Not me, someone close to me. IDKY. Just wanted to type it out. Finally accept it's real, I guess. Working with this guy, who's probably 15 years older than me. After some drinks, he tells me why he's a janitor. He's a smart dude, so I was kinda curious as well. He backed up out of his lane way, and a little girl came running across and he kills her.
Complete mistake. This had happened in the early 80s. Due to this, his record, he can't do really anything. Really sad.
An old friend I grew up with ended up messing around with the wrong crowd for a good few years until they all fell out. 4 of them wearing balaclavas went to his door and stabbed him multiple times. When they left, they forgot to shut the door and someone out walking the dog found him. After I found out about it a few weeks later, I was out drinking with some mates and a couple guys started talking utter rubbish about stuff until one of them said what him and his mates done to someone just weeks prior. Honesty poo myself when I put 2 and 2 together.
Have you told him? Have you considered going to the police?
Was a few years back now and he was no saint himself. It all went to court and the guy who was essentially bragging about had shown his face during the attack, but it was deemed a good alibi along with lack of evidence. They got off with it. It's not something anyone would want to get involved in, especially when we all live near these guys and families.
I was at a bar with a kitchen co-worker. He'd apparently been stabbed in some kind of altercation some years ago. Never asked him specifically what it was about, but he struck me as kind of a hippie-ish type dude, into fish and widespread panic and such, seemed like a mild-mannered stoner, so I assumed it had just been some guys messing with him and it escalated further, though I didn't know for sure. This night at the bar, a few shots in, he told me that after the stabbing, while he was in the hospital, his older sister had found the attackers and that they weren't alive anymore, or something to that effect. Went on about how dangerous his sister was and how she was connected to some scary people. The guy actually died a few months ago, out of the blue, from what was said to be a stroke. He was only 38 at the time of his death. He'd been gone from the restaurant we worked at for some time, got let go for drinking on the job. I assume it was just a random thing, or maybe he had undisclosed health issues, but still odd. He was an interesting guy.
My ex admitted, after we broke up, to a mutual friend that our son wasn't an accident. That she purposely baby-trapped me in the hopes to getting a marriage proposal. Our mutual friend told me and is no longer friends with my ex.
Was out drinking with some colleagues at a conference. We'd been at a club dancing, and we were on the way back to the place we were staying. We were chatting about something, I think maybe guys not taking no for an answer, and one of the guys said, I maybe RPD someone once. Worst part is the guy was one of a pair of identical twins and I'm not totally sure which one he was. Edit. This got a lot of upvotes. I took a look at my notes and it turns out that what he actually said was, I might have RPD someone. It was about 7 years ago, but my drunk ass apparently wrote that down so I wouldn't forget. It's also got the name of the twin who I believed it to be, but I'm maybe 80 to 90% certain on that. Not brutal or anything, but my mom admitted to breaking confidentiality to find my dad's birth parents despite him pleading not to. She laughed about it and thought it was the funniest thing about how mad my dad was. That was the day I realized my mom doesn't care about others.
My cousin's wife tried to do the same thing, using me. He's told her numerous times that he wanted nothing to do with his dad or any of his other relatives from that side, but she felt determined. It finally took me screaming, "F off with this bullpoo," before laying into her about respecting her husband's wishes. I still haven't told my cousin about this.
If I was gay, I would probably have RPD you.
Friend of mine was super drunk one night and I'm not sure how it started, but, through tears, he told me about how as a child, in his home country, he and his friend were abducted, RPD, and tortured by a group of men, before his friend was killed and dismembered in front of him. He then went on to tell me about how he had already gone back and hunted down and killed one of the men and was just waiting till he had enough money to go back and find the other 2 and kill them as well.
Hanging out with a couple of former roommates 20 or so years ago. One of them mentioned he found young people attractive, then clarified saying very young. Also never once hung out again.
I hope he didn't do anything to them.
Me too. I don't think he himself would do anything to a kid, but at the same time I would not be surprised if one day his hard drive gets seized and he gets picked up. 22 years since this conversation, maybe he got some therapy or is dead. Beats me.
A trainee co-worker of mine told me of his gang activities. He witnessed a man in debt getting forcefully injected with heroin. Edit. I need to add that this was in Germany, not in Brazil. Edit. Apparently I did injustice to Brazil. They have very friendly gangs.
Was terrifying at the time, being with my girlfriend of 5 years and being a few weeks away from proposing. She said, "I'll never have kids with you because I don't want them coming out like spotted little freaks. I have vitiligo." Had a former friend tell me he killed his brother. Didn't help. This was while we were trying to herd his drunk ass to the car as he was crying and yelling it at the top of his lungs. Amazing we didn't end up in cuffs or the very least get stopped and questioned. Come to find out his brother died of a brain aneurysm, and that morning he prayed for something to happen to get him out of school that day. He always blamed himself for his brother's death, and I get that to a degree.
I've told this story before, and it is one I don't expect anyone to believe, but I don't care who believes what. I was there, and I know what went down. Anyway, I had a friend in high school who had a younger brother I was also friends with and who also attended the same school. The three of us, sometimes with others, would often meet in the bathroom directly across from the administrative office to smoke cigarettes first thing in the morning. For whatever reason, the teachers and admins never looked in that bathroom for smokers. So we're in the bathroom that day, and the older of my two friends said that he had just gotten a new video game. I think it was Aliens on Jaguar or something along those lines. He was talking about how fun it was, and I asked if I could come over that night and play it. He said, "F this. Why wait? Let's go play it now." My parents would have given me a lecture or something, and they rarely answered the phone. There was a high probability that I could just skip school and my parents would never know. His dad would beat his and his brother's asses if they skipped school. He wouldn't be home until late, so going to their house wasn't an issue, but they had to make sure no one called their father when they didn't show up to homeroom. So they went to the admin office and told him that their aunt had just died and they needed to go home. They said their dad was on the way to pick them up. Everything went smooth as could be, and we headed out toward his house. We were about halfway to his house when a car pulls up on us like it is trying to run us over. It's their dad. He's effing fuming. He says, "Your aunt just died and I've been looking everywhere for you. Get in the effing car." We all thought that maybe the school did call, left a message offering condolences or something. And he just didn't know it was all a lie. So the younger of my friends says, "Dad, we just told him that so they wouldn't call you." He says, "I know what you did, and now my sister is dead. I hope you're happy." I still thought for sure he was just trying to teach them a lesson or something. But no, she actually died. Despite being the beat his kids for doing dumb poo kind of dude, he was as much a friend to all of us as his kids were. So later, I heard his side of the story. He called the school to tell them he would be picking them up because their aunt just died, and they said something like, "Oh yes. They already informed us of everything. They'll be waiting out front for you." He had just found out himself from their grandmother, who definitely did not call the school. So he was a little confused, but decided to figure that out later and went to pick them up. When he got to the school he didn't see them, so he walked around the building, then went in and asked him to call them over the PA, all while stressing out about his sister having just died. Then he realized. Asses were beat. They blame themselves to this day. I am pretty sure that Dad does too.
Just a warning. This one is kind of gross and you probably shouldn't read if you're sensitive to animal violence. Freshman year of college, a guy lived on my hall. I'll call him Rick. Rick was a pretty nice guy with a charming personality. He was a little over the top and could be a little too much at times, but people liked him. Fast forward a few months into school, Rick decides to buy a bunny and keep it secretly in his closet as a pet. Rick's roommate's girlfriend was really the one who took care of the bunny, and she loved it very much. This went on for some weeks, but then one day, the bunny was just gone. I asked around what had happened, but no one would tell me. Now for the intoxicated confession part. One night a few days later, while everyone was drinking, Rick's roommate's girlfriend called Rick out for killing the bunny. So, slowly, myself and a few other drunken teenagers learned that Rick had slowly tortured and killed the bunny over several hours. He was a complete monster, and he confessed to having the desire to kill animals and having done so for a long time. He even went as far as to ask if I would buy him an animal from the pet store, as he wasn't allowed to anymore. Honestly, it was a bad situation, and we should have done more to stop it. I really wonder how many more animals he's hurt. Edit. To everyone saying we should have reported it, we did. Several times to several places. We probably should have reported it outside of the college, but we didn't know that then. I don't know where he is now or what he is doing.
Someone definitely needs to check this guy's crawl spaces.
Maybe 10 years ago a friend's grandfather was sharing war stories with us. We're all Navy. Dude was toasted, and in the course of the stories he told us he threw a dude overboard at night after the two of them got in a fight. People went missing at sea a lot more back in the day, especially during WW2. So no one really investigated it, I guess. Either way, he was this super old dude, who up until this point was one of the nicest dude I'd ever met, telling us he murdered someone. Still surreal to think about. Edit. Since I've had a few DMs, we told my buddy's dad what he had said. His dad said he had heard the stories and talked to the NCIS about it in the past, but Gramps was getting senile, his stories weren't verifiable. Details would change, ship name would change, etc. Basically no way to know if it was just some story in an old mont's mind or not. Honestly though, in my opinion, he seemed pretty lucid when he told us, his eyes looked honest.
When he was a teenager, he heard from someone that a neighbor girl had been teasing his dog. So he pretended to be nice to her dog one day, and lured it into a field. He placed it by its collar onto a metal stake so it couldn't get free, and he slammed rocks into its head until it died. He laughed when he told me this. I had just married him a few weeks prior and I was horrified. Divorced now, 21 years later, when I kept realizing over and over that yes, he is a psychopath.
My best friend told me she loved me and wanted me to leave my wife last night. I've known her since we were in grade school and I feel sick. I don't even know if she remembers because this morning she texted me about some new manga release that I should buy for my wife. Edit. I did talk to my wife. She got home a few hours ago and had actually gone to my friend's house to pick up my guitar and switch that I left there. Friend was mostly quiet and seemed like she just woke up, so I wonder if she is worried about how to handle it. I talked to my wife about it. I told her what happened and she did cry a little about her relationship with our friend, but she mostly just seemed worried about how I am handling it. She told me to wait to decide if I was cutting the friend out or not so I can think about it and have time to talk to my friend before I just drop her. We both read a lot of the comments here and it sparked a lot of good conversation points. There were some more explicit things my friend said that I didn't post here because it was a bit embarrassing. My wife wants to talk to our friend about that but is going to let me have whatever conversation I need first. I saw a few comments of people worried I would leave my wife, and I just want to say that it's absolutely laughable that I would ever leave her. I assure you my wife has no competition no matter who it is. There is absolutely 100% nobody as amazing or cute as my adorable wife. I am not going to forget that. Thanks so much for the support and advice you all gave. I wasn't expecting a random Reddit comment to give me this much support.
Oh, she remembers.
My parents finally fessed up that they had another child, who died before me and my twin sister were born. This in itself wasn't exactly terrifying, because unfortunately that does happen sometimes. What made it so terrifying was the fact that my sister and I knew asterisk, yet for our whole lives our parents had convinced us we were misremembering. I'm not sure how we knew. Our brother died a year before we were born, and we've never met him. There are 0 pictures of him. He was never mentioned. Our parents, and the rest of our family, collectively forgot about him. And I have to mention that this is totally in line with our family. They will just close ranks and forget absolutely everything they don't want to acknowledge. Yet somehow, from a very early age, my sister and I told everyone we had a brother. Lots of our school friends were aware of our brother. When it was finally revealed that it was just the two of us, our friends gave us poo for lying, but my sister and I were just genuinely confused because we knew it was true. Many times over the years, we confronted our parents about it. Every single time, they lied to us. They promised we never had any other siblings, they swore up and down we were just confused. Then one day when they were both drunk we overheard them talking about him and ran down to call them on it, and they finally confessed. This still doesn't explain how we knew. I can only imagine we must have heard or seen something when we were very young, and just don't consciously remember. But it's effed up beyond belief that the entire family lied to us for 16 years. We even remembered his name. The most terrifying thing of all is the fact that my sister and I still asterisk think they're lying. Both of us have a distinct memory of playing with a slightly older boy when we were very young, and both of us remember thinking of him as our older brother within the context of the memory. Edit. A fair few of you are asking about public records, etc. and have mentioned a few things I hadn't thought of yet. First of all, we're Irish, so unfortunately any US-specific stuff won't apply, but some of the other ideas might yield some results. I hadn't thought of searching for newspaper archives for birth announcements or obituaries. Embarrassing, as I'm literally an archivist. So that's something I'm going to look into. I'm also currently researching my family's ancestry, so I might be able to access records via genealogy sites. It also might be possible to try to claim a copy of a birth or death certificate. As I'm a legal adult and also a direct relative, I don't imagine any of these things would get back to our parents. Finally, I have speculated in the comments, but to do so again where it's more visible. While it seems dodgy, I don't believe there's any foul play involved. My family are ridiculously image conscious to a terrible degree. Even if my brother died of a completely natural, unavoidable cause, I think my family would see a dead child as a failure, and would likely see it as better to just move on and forget about the whole thing. This has been a serious flaw in the family attitude ever since I can remember, so as unbelievable as it sounds, it might be as simple as embarrassment. As an excuse, it's nowhere near good enough, but it does unfortunately track with patterns I've seen all my life.
Not so much as a confession, but the moment I realized he was seriously messed up. I was living with my parents to help my sick mother. Dad came home absolutely wasted, and decided to have a really in-depth conversation with me. Asked about my depression, some traumatic things that had happened to me. He was really listening to me for the first time in my life. I felt seen and heard. We talked about what triggered my depression, suicidal thoughts, etc. He genuinely listened, then just stared me straight in the eyes with the most cruel smile on his face and said, "Now I know. I'm going to push and push and push. We'll see how long it takes until you kill yourself." I moved out the next day. Everyone told me to forget it, forgive it, because he was drunk. I've never stayed with them since, and try to avoid my dad as much as possible. With his previous behaviors, I could see him following through. Edit. I am completely floored by the amount of support and comments. Thank you all. I posted this because it was a messed up situation. Apparently I didn't realize quite how bad it was. My normal meter has been broken for a long time. Thank you for helping me to fine-tune it, if you will. I wasn't expecting this response, so if I don't reply, please know I will still read your comments. It's just a lot to take in. Thank you for your support, heart.
Oh my god, are you okay now?
I'm in therapy and it's helping me unpick my childhood, so I guess I'd say, I'm getting there.
On my birthday I got really wasted drinking at home with friends and let slip my most devastating memory from my time in the military. That's really the source of my PTSD. While in Afghanistan, my unit stumbled upon a stray herd of goats in an area where we regularly met with an informant we knew to be a shepherd. We found a mass of 17 decaying bodies that were the entirety of the man's nomadic clan. It was presumed that the informant was discovered by the Taliban and they put the entire group to death and left them there to rot. I spent the better part of a week burying the bodies. Some were decapitated, including one child. I think my friends were arguing about Ukraine and I was just so drunkenly frustrated. None of them had seen the terrifying reality of poo that happens in war. Poo was just a effing headline to so many. Edit. This kind of took off, so I wanted to add some context as well as thank everyone for your kind words and awards given. I was 19 when this happened and this became the focal point for me changing a lot of my worldviews. I decided not to renew my enlistment for this reason. I understand the conflict in Ukraine is different from the war in Afghanistan, but I was drunk as hell and have always resented how a large portion of Americans have this backseat approach to promoting violence around the globe because they've never seen it firsthand. I found out later, after the deployment when I was back in Germany, that the manner in which we buried these people was wildly inconsistent with Islamic and Pashtun burial traditions. I couldn't know that at the time, but I always had a strong suspicion that this event was never made known to the Afghan people to cover up U.S. involvement and questions about the informant network. Especially now that the Taliban are in charge. I have always had some distinctly personal regrets about the events that led up to this. Part of my job was to coordinate information requests for operational intelligence, and these requests would occasionally require the aid of an informant, although how we got the information was now generally not considered need to know for me. I live with the very real possibility that while I was sitting at a desk trying to get juicy bullet points for a PowerPoint presentation, I initiated a chain of events that was contributing to gruesome deaths of innocent people. So yay, done with that poo.
Dude, vet here. Old medic buddy of mine told me about how when he was in Iraq, a 400 pounds HME that was set for their convoy went off too early and took out a school bus full of kids. He had to go see if any could be treated. Man, it's rough. Take care of yourself, man. You're still here.
My dad is a 30-plus year U.S. Army vet. One day last year we were drinking and playing cards, and at one point he talked about some of the stuff he had to do when he was in Iraq and Afghanistan with the Army. He hates himself for it and basically believes his PTSD is his punishment for what he had to do over there, and never said anything else about it. My 2 siblings and myself keep trying to get him to get professional help or at least talk to us, but he refuses. Edit. Wow, this is getting a ton of responses. I thank you all for all of the resources you are recommending. If I don't respond, I'm sorry, but I'm making a list of the different recommendations and hopefully bring some of them up with him and hope he will agree to get help in one way or another. Thank you all for the tips. I don't have high hopes on him agreeing to do any of this, but it will not stop me from at least trying.
Got way too drunk and ended up telling a mate of mine how severe my depression really was and that I think about suicide a lot. That wasn't a fun morning after. Edit. Wow, I wasn't expecting so big of a blow up. I just want to say a massive thank you to everyone commenting, whether it was just hoping for the best, any advice, or just sharing their story showing that it can happen to anyone. You're all amazing human beings and I wish nothing but the best for all of you.
Thank you for watching. We upload new videos every day, so be sure to come back for more fun. Please consider liking and subscribing if you enjoyed the video.